What brand of equipment performed the absolute best at the Masters this year in 2020? Hey everybody, I'm Matt Williams Golf, and I thought it'd be interesting to take a look and do just a little bit of analysis of the numbers to see what players did the best and what brands or what golf equipment brands were they playing with. And the way I thought we would do this is that we would take a look at the earnings of all the players and see what brand of clubs they were hitting or playing during the Masters this year. Now, interesting side note when doing this, one thing that does skew it just a little bit is there are a handful of players that play just this total collage of different brands in their golf bag. So now for this analysis, I took those players out because I couldn't say, they might hit a TaylorMade driver and Srixon irons and probably have a Titleist fairway wood in there and maybe a Odyssey putter. There's a handful of players playing just this litany of different clubs, just all in their bag. So I took those players out. The other thing that you'll notice as we go through this information is there's a few players that have a little asterisk by their name. And what that means is that they play predominantly one brand, but perhaps maybe their putter is different. Or they play all one brand, driver through all of their irons and even into their wedges, but they have like one different wedge there for their 60 degree. That's very common. A handful of players just have that one club in their bag, maybe a hybrid or a 3-wood, that is different than everything else. And that's even if they are an ambassador or a signed player for that brand, they still might have that one club in there. Now, who's the big X factor in this that did pretty well at the Masters this year that's not going to be in here? You guessed it, Brooks Koepka. Now, there's a whole lot of other good players that did well who aren't going to be listed in this with any specific brand. But Brooks Koepka is probably the most popular golfer right now for not really having a brand. And he almost likes to brag about it, which is, that's fine, and it is what it is. But anyhow, let's take a look. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through brand by brand how they did and how they performed at the Masters this year. And then what we'll do is we'll stack those brands up against one another and compare them to see what brand of golf equipment performed the best at this year's Masters. So let's dive into the numbers here. Well, the first one we have right off the bat is TaylorMade. Now, full disclosure, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know I'm a little biased towards TaylorMade. That's my favorite brand right now. I have a TaylorMade driver, I have TaylorMade hybrids, I have TaylorMade irons, and TaylorMade wedges, all in my bag right now. So I'm a little biased. And geez, when you look at the lineup of who the TaylorMade brand has, my goodness, they got some huge names. All right, so let's look at how TaylorMade did. Well, TaylorMade gets skewed right away, right? Because they had the winner, Dustin Johnson. And the way I'm comparing this is we're going off of total earnings, not average place or anything like that, which basically would have yielded the same results. We're going off of total earnings here. Well, Dustin Johnson skews that a little bit right off the bat because he won the whole thing. So just in over $2 million, we got Dustin Johnson. I had Tiger Woods on my list second just because I knew he was a TaylorMade guy. And with his 10 on number 12 on Sunday, that knocked him down a peg. So he only made just over $50,000. Rory McIlroy, Rory with a great finish, $437,000. John Rahm, $358,000. Justin Rose. Now you'll notice a little asterisk by Justin Rose, which means there's one club that he doesn't use. It's TaylorMade, or that he uses that isn't TaylorMade. And I'm drawing a blank on which one that is. I'm on a little information overload on equipment and players, and so I forget what the one club is. But Justin Rose, 115, Colin Morikawa, 41.4, Ches Reavie, Nick Taylor, and Mike Weir. For a grand total for the TaylorMade players, $3,249,920 or $361,102 average per player. Now, if you see that little second number on there, it's $147,490 per player. That's if I took Dustin Johnson out of that. They still averaged almost $150,000 per player. All right, so that's how TaylorMade Group performed. The next one that we're going to take a look at is going to be Ping. So Ping had a pretty good lineup. Corey Connors, Bubba Watson, Cam Champ, Sebastian Munoz, who did great, Louis Oosthuizen, Tony Finau, Lee Westwood, Victor Perez. Corey Connors, you see the numbers, 287.5, 26.450 for Bubba. He had a rough one. Cam Champ did well. Sebastian Munoz, both first-timers at the Masters, they both did well. Oosthuizen slid quite a bit, I think, on day 4. Tony Finau and Lee Westwood both had a hard time really rallying. I've got an asterisk by Tony Finau. There's one club that he doesn't use, or that he uses. It's not Ping. It might even be a PXG. I can't remember. But anyways, and Lee Westwood plays the full array of Ping, Victor Perez. So for a grand total for the Ping players, $852,472 for an average of $106,559 per player. Let's move on. Now we're going to go with Titleist. Now, Titleist had the most players in the field playing in all or almost entirely all Titleist lineup in their bag. So they had the most players in the field. So their total earnings or total winnings are obviously going to be higher because they have more players. But let's just see how this plays out. So when we cut over to Titleist here, obviously they're headlined by Cam Smith and Sungjae Im. Both finished in a tie for second. Both really young golfers, over $1 million apiece. And then you got Justin Thomas, C.T. Pond, Webb Simpson, Patrick Reed. Guys, my goodness, Patrick Cantlay. Wow. Some huge names just playing all Titleist. Ian Poulter, Adam Scott, Jordan Spieth, Charles Howell III, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Bernd Weisberger, and Jimmy Walker. Those were and by the way, it should be noted, I'm only including the players that made the cut, right? So that was a grand total for Titleist of $3,988,807. So basically $4 million. For an average per player of $284,915, $284,915, so $285,000. Now, to be fair, just because I was curious to see how the bulk of the players did, just like I did with TaylorMade where I removed Dustin Johnson from the equation, with Titleist, I also looked at what they would average if I took Cam Smith and Sungjae Im out of it. And if you take those two out of it, they still average $163,734 per player in earnings. Wow. Titleist really well represented in the Masters. Really well represented. All right. Next, we're going to move on to Callaway. So with Callaway, we've got Phil Mickelson, Dylan Fratelli, Mark Leishman, Kevin Na, Xander Schauffele, Danny Willett, Christian, there you go, Matt Wallace. Now, I had an asterisk by Kevin Na. Again, gosh, I can't believe I can't remember my prep. What club was it that Kevin Na's using that isn't Callaway? Could be his putter. I don't exactly remember. But basically, this is the Callaway grouping here. Phil, well, he had a tough time. Dylan Fratelli played awesome. Leishman, great. Kevin Na, pretty solid. Xander, solid. Danny Willett, Christian, Matt Wallace. So for a grand total of the Callaway players, $1,249,165 for an average of $156,146 per player. All right. Very interesting in the Callaway lineup. Let's take a look at Cobra. Now, well, you'll see here in a second. Cobra only had 2 players, right? Ricky Fowler, Bryson DeChambeau. Make no mistake, guys, there's other players using Callaway, Titleist, Ping, TaylorMade, and Cobra clubs, but they're not playing the entire bag. So for Cobra, the entire just lineup in their bag for Cobra was Ricky Fowler, Bryson DeChambeau. Both names that could have easily won the Masters this year, but the tournament just didn't go the way they wanted. So between them, $136,850 for an average of $68,425. Now, what I want to do, so those are the main brands. Now, you would say, well, there's other brands, right? Srixon, PXG, Mizuno. There's other brands, Mura. Trying to remember all the brands that were played at the Masters this year, but a lot of brands that were played in the Masters. But those brands didn't have players. Well, that's not true. PXG had one player that was playing a full PXG lineup. None of the other brands had any players that were going, at least that made the cut and finished in the top half of the Masters, that, you know, were going with a full brand in their set. Were there guys hitting Strixon? You betcha. Were there guys hitting Mizuno? Yes, there were. But they weren't going a full bag. So there was really no way I could, index that and include those players that weren't going with one solid brand, and to really look at how that brand performed at the Masters. So let's look at the total earnings now of all of the main brands here. So when we look at the total earnings of the main brands, Titleist comes in first, 3.9, call it 4 million, just over 3.2 million for TaylorMade, over 1.2 million for Callaway, almost 900 grand for Ping, and the small number for Cobra, because there were really only 2 committed and dedicated Cobra players in the field, albeit really, really good players at that. This is fine, but like I said earlier, Titleist had way more players in the field than the other brands. So the real, probably most objective and best way to analyze this is how much average earnings per player did each brand have. When we go by average earnings per player, let's take a look. Oh, look at that. TaylorMade with the win. 361,000, 285,000 for Titleist, 156,000 for Callaway, 106 for Ping, 68 for Cobra, and you'll notice there was one extra category PXG because there was one PXG player. Guess who it was? I was actually surprised. I didn't know he was playing PXG. Zach Johnson, and he didn't have a great Masters. Certainly not up to his expectation. So yeah, I threw PXG in there. But yeah, that's how it. So TaylorMade takes the crown as the brand that performed the best at the Masters, with Titleist in second place, and third place was Callaway, with a pretty good showing, and then on from there. So really, really interesting. Now, for us as players, for us as average golfers, should we put any stock in that? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. At the end of the day, you've got to go with a club. Forget the label, forget the brand. What club feels the best to you? What club performs the best to you? That's all you got to go with. But I think it's still kind of fun to look at these numbers and see how the brands performed, and it's pretty fun to see how the brands perform. Worth noting, and I don't have a slide for it, but worth noting that if you took Dustin Johnson out of the TaylorMade lineup, because one guy winning really skews it, right? And if you take, in fairness, the 2 second place finishers out of the Titleist grouping, the rankings change a little bit. Do you want to know what it is? I'll tell you, and I don't have a slide for it. Number 1, if you take those top performers out, then it goes Titleist number 1, Callaway slides into number 2, and TaylorMade slides down to number 3. So Callaway really had a good weekend. They didn't have any of the big 1, 2, or 3 top finishers, but in terms of how solid their players did, pretty darn solid. But I didn't create a slide for that. That's just conjecture. That's just something interesting to talk about. At the end of the day, I think you got to go with the full field, right? And how all the players in each of the brands performed. And then when you factor that all in, TaylorMade takes the crown. Again, Titleist in second, Callaway in third. And that's how they performed at this year's Masters. Masters unlike any other we've had before. That's how the brands performed. All right, everybody. Talk to you guys later.